Good evening, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me on tonight's edition of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Sibs Matiela, and I'm here to answer all of your burning questions that have to do with property. I know nothing about it. Well, no, I've learned some things as you know, we've been moving and filming this podcast, but you know that I bring in all of the experts to answer all of these questions so that you and I can learn together. Today's guest is Yashina Maharaj, who is the National Sales Training Coordinator at SA Home Loans, and she's here to tell us more about how to improve your credit score. Yashina, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you, Sebs. It's awesome to be here.
Well, thank you for taking the time just to, help us understand more about credit scores. What exactly is your credit score? How do you have one? What is it used for? Tell me more about credit scores.
So Sebs, it does sound confusing because people always immediately get worried and concerned when we talk credit scores. But to put it simply, a credit score is a record of your borrowing and repayment habits. For instance, when you take out a clothing account, every time you pay your installments, it gets noted as positive data. And every time you miss an installment, it's recorded as a negative data. And every credit active consumer has a credit report that is completed by a credit bureau. The TransUnion credit score is essentially a numerical summary of your TransUnion credit report. All the credit information in your credit report contributes towards the calculation of your credit score. Your score can improve or deteriorate depending on your credit behavior.
Okay, so how often should I be checking my credit score?
So at SA Home Loans, we're very happy to help clients have a look at their credit score, what is happening there. So you should try to do it at least once a year if you're not in the market to shop for a home loan. But if you are shopping for a home loan or any other type of financing, they will run a credit score for you or run a credit check on you.
Okay, so what are the current score ranges? Now I go onto, because I know there's multiple platforms where someone can check a credit score, but because those numbers are also different, all you'll know is that if it's in the green, then that's positive, or if it's maybe in the red. But what are the score ranges that typically separate someone with poor credit from someone with average or good credit?
So the thing is that every financial institute derives a scorecard based on their lending criteria, their credit functions, and what their rules are. So ultimately, this score can be impacted by various factors. So you could build a really good score based on your payment history and the type of debt you have, or you could build or drop to a poor score depending on conduct and the type of debt that you have.
Obviously, coming out of a global pandemic that none of us saw coming, a lot of people were in a situation where they weren't necessarily able to meet very many of their financial obligations, and now sort of getting back on their feet and getting back on track with all of the plans that they'd made, when the money was coming in, then it stopped, and now it's coming back in again. So I imagine one's credit score would have been heavily affected. Um, by the financial difficulties that were brought on by COVID. How would someone in that position now go about bettering their financial position?
So yes, life happens, and whether it was COVID, whether it's a loss of a job, retrenchment, we know that many of these scenarios have played out in the last 2 years for many people. So the good news is that you can correct your credit rating. You can correct previously poor behavior or incidents that happened due to loss of jobs and loss of income. So your first point would be to actually check your credit scores to have an assessment done. At SA Home Loans, we're very happy to sit with a potential client or someone that is looking to have a pre-approval done and explain the steps to them of where they could possibly work to improve. So if you've had a clothing account that you possibly didn't honor on time due to lack of funds or due to time, you'd start there. Honoring these accounts on time makes a massive difference. Create your own budget. Understand what it is that you have in terms of funds and what you're spending. Prioritize your credit card. Those are accounts that impact your score heavily. Close accounts that you don't use. Sometimes we have these accounts and we think, okay, well, maybe it's a misconception that people have that the more accounts I have, the better the score, or the fewer accounts that I have, the better the score. Actually, it's about the mix of accounts you have and how well conducted these accounts are.
So I'm so glad that you brought that up, actually, these misconceptions, because it's 2022. I don't think very many people are going out to open a clothing account, for instance. But because you were told 10, 20 years ago, this is how to go about building your credit score and how you're going to end up buying a house, go do this, you end up with a lot of unnecessary sort of fluff on the side, thinking that it's adding value to what your plans, and your plans coming to fruition eventually. But actually, it doesn't apply anymore. So while we're on this, what would you say are the most common misconceptions that people have regarding their credit score? And can we just clear it up right now?
So, firstly, like I said, you have this misconception of people believing too much debt or too little debt assists in a better score. Both are wrong. Okay. It's about a reliable track record and a mixture of healthy debt. So, store cards, credit cards, home loans, service contracts such as cell phones, these are basically examples of a healthy mix of debt. Paying these, honoring these on time, and making sure that you are maintaining available credit. So don't take all of these credit lines to its maximum because
Mm.
that also impacts your score. Maintain a mix of healthy credit and avoid multiple credit cards. So, there was a time prior to Poppy where you'd be called by all the institutes to be offered several cards. And you would think, wow, I'm such a good client. I'm getting a credit card from every single financial institute. However, that just increases your risk of dropping your scores because you have way too many credit cards and too many lines of credit.
Mm. So when a potential home buyer first now applies for a home loan or a bond, they find out their credit score is in the dumps. What exact steps are you saying they must take to try and correct that?
Okay, so the first step would be is let us run a credit check on you. Let's understand what's impacting the score. What has gone wrong with your current credit score? From there, step one, we're going to look at possible accounts that were misconducted. There could be several accounts that are impacting your score because perhaps you've overextended those lines. You might have exhausted an overdraft facility, exhausted a credit
Mm.
card, potentially taken too many personal loans, and they are all close together. So we would sit with the client at SA Home Loans. We would guide the person through understanding that credit report step one. What is it actually telling you? And where do you need to focus in terms of what requires your attention and where can you make corrections to alleviate the strain that you have put on your budget that has resulted in a poor score? So that would be the start for a potential home buyer.
Okay, so on the flip side of that, what is a surefire and foolproof way to make sure that I've got good credit, but I now need to maintain it going forward?
Okay. So some of the steps that we would normally talk about is you must know what you earn and what you spend. That's
Mm.
step one. If you are unaware of your spending behavior and what you're left with, chances are you're going to overspend, which immediately impacts affordability. Paying your installments on time, it sounds silly, but a lot of people think, okay, well, if my payment's due at the end of the month and I just don't get to it, but I'm going to do it maybe in the first week of the new month, that's already showing poor credit behavior because you
Mm.
didn't honor the date on time. Prioritize things like your credit card, your home loan, your vehicle finance. Those are big and long-term payments that require immediate attention. Accounts that you're not using or accounts that you possibly took years ago. We talk about clothing accounts, like you rightfully said. Not
Hmm.
many people utilize those platforms now. Close those accounts. You don't need them, but they're appearing as a credit line on these records. And don't use credit debt. So it's important that you use real money to pay off bills. When you start to juggle credit cards to settle accounts, that data can get flagged as financial struggle, which could have a negative impact on your credit score.
Got it. Yashina, I'm hearing everything that you're saying, and I know we all try, but it's very difficult for that money to leave your account. But I hear you don't put it off until the third or the fourth. Just do it immediately when the money comes in, no matter how painful it is. Got it.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Absolutely.
so much for all of your insights. I definitely look forward to speaking to you again in the future. I feel like there's so much more we can talk about, but we'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much, Yashina Maharaj, who's the National Sales Training Coordinator at SA Home Loans.
Thank you so much for your time.
Listen, that's all I've got for you this evening. I hope you've learned as much as I have about credit scores. Otherwise, I will see you on the next episode of the Private Property Podcast. Good night.